All right, hello everyone. I am back here. I have a guest from UK. This is Adrian, the pub lord. I know nowadays when you say lord, landlord, or pub lord, you're immediately labeled in so many ways as a bad guy, even though you're providing jobs, right? So I wanted to hear your take on this beautiful day on June 6th on 2023. Just two of us, two regular guys trying to make sense out of this nonsense, what's going on in US and UK. I watched you on Mineko 64. You had an interview with
Uh-huh.
him. That's kind of we've been following each other on Twitter now for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And I really like your take on stuff because you talk about what actually regular people are interested in, not just some big names. They throw some projections where the market's going to go and all that other stuff. So with all that being said, so what's going on in UK, man? What's going on with businesses and how are things with inflation? Break it down for us in a few minutes.
Basically, I mean, we're in the midst of a high inflation environment. It's going officially, it's what 9 or 10% or whatever it is. But unofficially, it's probably going up to 15 or 20% food inflation. Some items are, 50% in a year, 40 to 50%. And if you want to look that up, you can go on CGS Strategy, which is a pub. Pub and hospitality where they monitor prices, so it's not government affiliated, and they monitor prices independently, and they can show what items are going up and what's going on with the different prices of different things. But I mean, the thing is about food inflation, it hits hard up the most, So if somebody doesn't have much of an income, it's going to affect them more than what it does. Say, like if you've got 500 grand in the bank, it's not going to really affect you if a tin of beans goes from 75 pence to £1.50. But if somebody's on the poverty line, on the bread line, as what people call it, then it's going to affect them a lot more. So what you're finding now is, as people who are on a low to medium income and visiting hospitality as much. They're not going out as much. They're tightening up the belts. They're probably not going on holiday as much, or they're staying local when they do go on holiday. So you're finding that the spending as such is shrinking, especially in the area where we are, because we're in the northern Teesside area, where it's quite well known as being like an industrialised area, which is a bit more hard up than what the down south. So what you've got is a combination of rising costs for businesses. Wages have went up, for example. The beer Heineken went up. I think it was 17.4% in a year, whereas normally their price increase would be 2%
Can you
every
say
year.
that again? What was the for the beer for Heineken? What was the percentage that it
So
went up?
Heineken went up 17.4% in one year. So in January last year, they've done two price increases, which amounted to like 15 point something percent. Whereas
Hmm.
normally in a normal year, you would expect the price increases to be around the 2% mark. So, which is in line with inflation. So
Yeah.
obviously their cost basis went up, so then they're having to pull that money in uh, um, from somewhere, and that's how they do it. They put the prices up, which is it's quite interesting on how they've done that, and they're preempting it now in a way by putting the prices up at the beginning of the year. But what they're telling you is that inflation is unofficially, 17%.
Okay. Do you have food at your pub or it's mostly just drinks?
Mostly just drinks. I have done food in the past, but I don't bother at the moment because just the cost of it, and a lot of people aren't willing to spend that much on food, and that the location is it's more of a summer sort of place, So
Hmm.
in the summer it's a bit busier.
Got it. Because
Um,
I've noticed when I post something on Twitter, and as you know, I post a
uh,
lot, and the people will jump in. Well, you're talking about diapers. I don't have kids, or I don't need diapers myself, or they would make jokes like that, or they would say, well, I
yeah,
did not need like one of those 5 gallon tanks, not tanks, but like little like canisters that you can put your diesel in or gas. For
Yeah,
instance, it was like almost $40 for one of those at just a regular Tractor
it's
Supply here in
expensive,
the
isn't it?
country. Just insane. And they would say, well, I don't need that. And then they might say, well, I don't drink beer, so I don't care what Heineken is. And people are just kind of like ignoring the fact and trying to hide, kind of just ignoring the obvious that you can continue saying, well, I don't need diapers. I don't need this. I don't need that. I don't need candy. I don't need beef. I don't need this. And then you keep getting caught because look at the parts and services as well in US is really bad. Like you're looking at, like, for instance, I had a crew show up just to look at my generator that's run on propane tank.
Uh-huh.
And again, somebody may say, I don't need the generator. You see how this story is just interesting.
Yeah,
I don't need that. So it's not of my concern, right? But again, that's just an engine, right? And they showed up, they charge you 400 just to take a look, $400, right?
yeah,
Just to take a look what the problem is. Obviously, some people are very handy, they know how to fix things. I'm not one of those guys. I'm learning as I go. But again,
mm,
inflation in services and parts in US is just not generators. Overall, in general, it is really bad. I think it's at 50%, honestly, 50. That's what it is in about
yeah,
for parts and services, including wait time and everything else with all that nonsense.
yeah. I mean, it's. I mean that has went up in the UK. I mean, you find that it's like I was looking at a chest freezer, like a big chest freezer, and I remember looking maybe about 3 years ago, and they were like £200, maybe 220, and then I looked the other day, and they're like 450 quid. Same item, the
Same
same
item.
good. It's just went up. Yeah, same item, same good. It's just went up by it's doubled in, more or less doubled in price, hasn't it? And when people say, "Oh, I don't need this, I don't need that," it's kind of like burying your head in the sand because at some point they may need it, and other people do need it. So when people do need it and they've got to spend the money on stuff like yourself, you need to get your generator fixed, and you need to buy a diesel can for it or whatever you need it for. Then that puts the cost of your goods, your service up. It's the farming and the cow, the meat, because you've got to pay for that and you've got to find the money somewhere. Because every business person, or it has a duty to make a profit for the employees and for your, for yourself as well. And a lot of people forget that because
Mhm.
we're kind of living in a society where it's a lot of things are being socialized.
Of course, everything
So,
is.
for example,
Yep, I agree.
and
So I looked at some
people.
numbers. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. Keep going.
Oh, it's okay. Go on.
Yeah, I was going to ask you for some housing and car prices. I posted today
Yeah,
Twitter for the average. Let me just find it real quick to make sure I get the numbers right. Right there for the average. I don't want to look through the phone right now because I remember most of it. Like for instance, a median home right now in US is approaching $500,000. It's about 450. It was about 320 just a couple of years ago, and lower in some metrics. So like
yeah,
280 maybe. So again, that almost double. Wages in US right now are, this is the number from the government, right? And I'm just going to read those out of my brain right now that I remember. It was 20 to 24-year-olds in US are making roughly about 36,000 a year. It's what they're saying. And for
hmm,
somebody that's older right now, let's say me and you living in United States, we should be making, it's what they're saying, about 55. I believe it's right in between that. It would be kind of a fair number to say about maybe 45,000 is an average pay
yeah.
now in US, while homes are approaching, like I said, close to 500,000, $500,000 right now with interest rates over
Ten
7.
times, isn't it?
Yes, 7%. Now, when it comes to cars, this is another interesting one. We got some really crazy numbers. You're looking at like just under $50,000 for an average car. That's what's going on. Used cars are about $27,000. It just dropped about 600 as of last month. So used car, a couple of years ago, a new car was averaging about that much, about 30,000. Right now, it's a
Yeah,
used car about 30,000, and the new cars are about 50, right? And the wages are under the car, average car. I mean, this is completely banana republic. And I was just looking for fun what the price is. I'm looking to buy like one of those Suburbans, like a longer one, like a, if
yeah,
you're familiar, like a Yukon, Denali, or something like that. I knew it's not the right time to buy, but I just wanted to see what the prices are now and what the interest rates are. And they're looking at 8% on those newer ones are about $80,000, right? $80,000, and you're looking at 8%. So again, I know that 10% of Americans are doing pretty good right now. They can afford that, probably just write a check and buy one of those. But 90% are going to get into these 7, 8 year loans at 8% locked in, or for the
yeah.
homes. So just a quick, what's the comparison between US and UK when it comes to that? Do you have any numbers
Well,
in your mind for that?
I mean, say the average house price in London, which is not where I'm at. In London, you're talking about 720 or 750,000, around that price, for an
Okay.
average house, which is, but if you took the minimum wage in London, somebody on minimum wage, they're earning 22,000 a year. So the house price in London compared to their wages are way out of line. And they say that's because all foreign investors coming in and buying up all the property. And
Mhm.
um, but in the northeast, where I'm from, you probably get a house for 200, like a decent house for 200,000. For a bit of a rubbish house, you're probably talking about 100,000. But there isn't as many jobs up here, you see. So the further down south you go, the better the jobs pay. But if you're stuck in a minimum wage job, you're going to be stuck, because say like if somebody went out and spent 750,000 on a house and they could get the mortgage for it, their payment would be about 4,100 a month, but their wages would only be maybe 1,300 a month. So you can see
Wow.
there's no
Yeah,
so,
doesn't make
so
it. The math doesn't
doesn't
make.
make any sense.
No, it's
And there
it's
is a lot of
weird.
people in London on minimum wage. I mean, and they tend to share houses and things like that. Um, but the north isn't as bad as down south. If the further north you go, the more in line with wages that their housing is,
Yeah,
which
and
is quite interesting.
it is. I'm so glad you mentioned London. Like for instance, in US, if you look at a state, let's say like California, right? It's about
Yeah,
the same. Obviously, USD is different, but it's about 750,000 US dollars for an average home in
yeah,
California. Where you look at the places like, let's say, Missouri, it's about 200,000. That's why they're looking at that average about 450 to five. And
yeah,
I try to a while back telling people to get locked in with the lower interest rates and try to get
hmm
away from cities and look for some of these areas that are not.
yeah. I remember you saying on your YouTube. Yeah, my sister actually went and bought a house probably about 2 years ago now, and she paid about 220, I think, for the house in Newcastle, which is on the outskirts of Newcastle. It's a nice
Mhm.
house. But I was saying to her, how long's your mortgage deal for? And she told me at the time, and I says, oh, you've got to be careful, because the rates could go up. And I'm a bit worried that the rates will go up in the next few years when she goes to remortgage, because a lot of people forget. But I remember my grandmother and my granddad, they moved house just in the early 90s as the recession hit and interest rates skyrocketed. And then they had a hard time keeping up the payments on the house because I think they overextended a little bit, you know. So the people have got to be very careful about what they do with regards to taking on debt, especially in this sort of environment, because with inflation skyrocketing, they've only got one thing they can do to try and bring the inflation down. Because of all the currency creation, they've only got one thing they can do, and the chances are that they'll may reverse on that and flip it around and create more currency and create more of a problem. Like I was reading the thing about them trialing universal credits, universal basic income, which is
I just
basically
read
giving
it
away
today on Zero.
helicopter money.
Yeah.
Yeah, just helicopter money, like they're just going to throw money at people. But obviously, when they do that, then the value of the currency is going to decline faster than ever. So it might be great for the first year or for the first few months, but then when they're getting this money, it's just going to not buy anything.
Yeah,
And
I try
I
to
mean, it's a boat,
people,
wouldn't it?
yeah, I try to warn people a while back. Me and you talked about it on Twitter. I know Maneko has been beating on the drum for a while now, but the same thing that, and right now, like I believe we are at the right at, if you look at like maybe championship game 7 of NBA or whatever it is, Super Bowl, I believe you cannot make a mistake right now in the times that we are in and what is coming. And I'm just trying to stick with the basics here, not to get too wild. Is why I always talked about just trying to work your way. If you're speculating in the market, to take some profits out, buy some real things with, and just sticking with that. I'm kind of putting the best players on the court here. Like I don't want to sit Michael Jordan right now on the bench on the game 7 if we're going back into early 90s or something, right? Like I don't want to sit him out. And I look at precious metals as that. Like I don't want to sit them out right now. I want to do exactly the opposite of what the lamestream media is talking about. So I always try to at least put a little bit of solutions to a problem on this channel. And that's why I'm so glad you mentioned all this currency creating that is definition of inflation. We can look it up in Wikipedia now, that's been changed and all that, but we know what is going on. So do you agree with that people need to be more in the real things and be very careful now? Or to finish the video in few
yeah, I mean, I've always been an advocate of having your own gold and silver, having your own food, a bit of food supply in the house, because you don't really know what's around the corner. But having real things is not a bad move. I mean, property is a real thing, but the prices are probably a bit overinflated. They probably went up too much, and then having things where they're going to rise in price in an inflationary environment is a wise move. Like you could go out. I bought some a saw, and I thought, well, I'll keep it for a year, then I'll sell it, and I'll make like maybe £50 or £100 on it or whatever. But that's the kind of thing you want to be doing, because as a currency dies, as it collapses, real things start having more and more value in that currency in nominal terms, as in like the number which is on the currency. So if you've got debt to pay off, it's a wise move to get real things and then sell them at a later date to pay that debt off.
Yes, and maybe and maybe not being of these places like even Texas. People talk about Texas and Florida. I lived in Florida right before I moved to Arkansas in the country.
Yeah.
And I thought it was very congested, very hard to find any good deals or anything. And I was just, I'll go to Florida on vacation, but I prefer something like this. And a lot of people may say, again, on this is what I hear all the time. Well, it's easy for you to say and all that. No, it was been a lot of shuffling and reshuffling around and planning. It is doable. And even if you take something off the table on one end and put a bigger on the other side, meaning if you're not making as much to be away from the cities, maybe you're making half of the money, but you got, your overhead is 50% less, right? And you have more freedom, for instance. You may not make 250,000 a year. You might make 80,000 a year. That's a huge difference. But you're looking at your mortgage in places like Arkansas or Mississippi or Missouri. If you can find a remote position, you can find a place with land still. Now the payments are
Yeah,
way higher now. It's a little late. It's getting a little tough because it used to be on an average about 1,700 in US for your 30-year fixed mortgage. Now it's about
yeah,
2,700. It's like insane difference, and I just think people are really getting priced out, and to wait, I think, is just getting worse. So that's what I was trying to
mm,
suggest to people, even though I say this is not life advice or trading advice. I was just kind of telling people what I'm doing and why and what I see it's coming. And based on what you're saying, it's very similar, if not identical, in UK, with inflation, maybe even worse in UK. As well, it is
yeah.
because the dollar is still stronger, even though out here, when you are physical in
Stronger.
the
Yeah,
US, you're like, well, what do you mean it's a strong dollar? Every time I go to the store, I need more.
yeah.
So,
Well, it's like the best of a bad bunch, really. Is I mean, that's one way to look at it. But the problem that what we've got over here is you've got these politicians who are basically buying votes. You know, they're throwing money left, right, and centre to pay for different things, and you know they're basically buying people up, which is never it's not going to end well. You know, I mean, for a Conservative Party to offer, you know, universal basic income, you know, it's doesn't goes against their ethos. So really, and a lot of the things that they've done, especially over COVID, has been a socialist policies.
yeah,
And what you've got over here in the city centres, like I went to Glasgow the last week, and it was all signs, ULEZ, low admission zone. You know, so if you drive into the city centre, you've got to pay a fee. You get fined or pay a fee. Um, so, and a lot of the city centres are going that way, and you can see it across the UK, like Newcastle is, Edinburgh is, all these big cities. London already has a ULEZ ULEZ zone, which is basically low admissions. But I mean, me personally, I want to be able to drive into my house without paying a fine, or drive whichever car I want. So you have advantages and disadvantages to living in the city centres. Um, but to me, the disadvantages outweigh the advantages. For us over here, probably, I mean, you're probably better off living in a suburban town or something because the way the cities will go. I mean, they're on about making these 20 minute cities and things like that. And
yeah,
down Oxford, they put all block people in the houses. Basically, my sister lives in Newcastle where she used to live in Jesmond. They've blocked off some of the roads. You know, like block them off so you can't get into
already
the
happening. Wow.
already. Yeah, and you like think, well, that's crazy. You know, why aren't people protesting about it? But a lot of these people who live in the cities are a bit, all the media's in the head about pollution and climate change, and they kind of like go along with it. Oh, well, we can't fight against climate change. We can't say anything bad against that, so we'll just have to get a new car, which is
Yeah, yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, they'll immediately censor this channel just by saying the words like, and I don't care, I say it how it is, but just to say climate change, they're immediately the algorithms are working because obviously we know
Really?
they want the people to be the sheeple. That's just how it is, and it's unfortunate because it's happening everywhere. So hopefully, channels like this and guys like you speaking out too can wake up a little bit more people, and this is where it gets interesting, right? To finish the video, a lot of people think
Yeah.
it needs to be millions and millions of people, almost everybody, that needs to be on the same page to make a change. No, it is not. It just takes a small percentage, maybe 1% of the population, and things will get changed. So I think it's very important that we keep trying to, you know, I hate to say this, wake people up, because that's the
Hmm.
way it is, because some are still really asleep.
I
And the
think a
more
lot of
we do
people I, I mean, I think a lot of people are kind of a bit. They watch a lot of TV and a lot of the news on the TV, and they're fearful. You know, like they're scared in case the places flood out, and but it's obvious that it's not going to, because if you look at like the banks would do the risk analysis on mortgages, and they wouldn't give people mortgages in areas which are going to flood. it's so obvious that they're looking into all these factors, and there's no way somebody would lend money on a house which is going to flood in 2 years' time or 5 years' time. And when I was a kid at school, they used to go on about all this, go on about climate change, this and that, and but it's still not materialised. So maybe when we're both 70, it'll still be the same, and they'll be
Yeah,
onto
well,
another maybe
as you
ice age or
know,
something.
climate does change a lot. Like I had 50 degrees out here in Arkansas, then the next day was 80, then it back down to 60, then it's 90,
Yeah,
then it was raining, then it was
oh,
not. As we know, it's been changing for a long time, but
yeah,
that's, yeah, that is just everything. It's all about, as you know, selling fear. And I hope a lot of people are just trying to block all that and focus on what really matters is to protect themselves and their families from this insanity that's going on, the global
yeah,
socialism, and going from that. With that being said, Adrian, I set
yeah,
I set the meeting for 30 minutes. And I would love to have you back on maybe like in a month or so to just kind of see
yeah.
what
No worries.
changed in UK. And so I don't get cut off here, I'll finish the video right now and I'll talk to you once I stop this right here. And we will talk soon. The New American Realist with Adrian Pablord. We are out.